She had spent most of her life moving quietly through the world. She worked at a small cafe in the heart of the city, serving coffee, pastries, and polite smiles to a never-ending flow of customers. Some days felt endless, filled with the hum of the espresso machine and the clinking of cups. She was good at her job, but it was the kind of work that allowed her to remain invisible, which suited her just fine. People didn't really notice her, and she liked it that way. There was comfort in moving through life unnoticed, in being part of the background. But there was another side to her life that almost no one knew. In a small, quiet corner of her apartment, she had a piano. It was old and worn, with a few keys slightly faded, but it was perfect to her. She spent hours there every evening, practicing, experimenting, and letting music flow from her fingertips. The piano was her escape, her secret world where she could pour out every thought and feeling that she kept hidden during the day. To anyone else, it might have looked like a simple hobby. To her, it was everything. One chilly evening, the cafe was quieter than usual. Most of the regular customers had left, leaving only a few people scattered at the tables. She was wiping down the counter when a group of sharply dressed guests walked in. They were different from the usual patrons. There was an air of excitement and importance around them, a quiet confidence that set them apart. They glanced around the cafe, chatting quietly among themselves, until one of them noticed her. He stepped forward and smiled politely, introducing himself as the host of an exclusive event happening in the city. His voice was warm but carried authority. He had a special request. He asked her to play at the event. It wasn't a long performance or anything complicated, just a simple piano tune to entertain the guests. It was unusual, she thought, because she had never been asked to play in front of anyone outside of her small practice sessions at home. She felt a mix of surprise and nervousness, but something about the way he looked at her made her want to agree. There was trust there, as if he had seen something in her that she hadn't even shown to herself yet. She hesitated for a moment, imagining the room full of people who were probably wealthy, confident, and used to being impressed by the best of the best. She worried that she would look awkward, that her fingers would fumble, or that the simple tune would sound dull in such a grand setting. Yet, deep down, she felt a spark of curiosity. What if this was her chance to step into the light, even just for a moment? The host seemed to sense her hesitation and smiled reassuringly. He explained that the tune didn't need to be anything elaborate, just something light and pleasant that the guests could enjoy while they mingled. He said it with such ease that it felt less like a demand and more like an invitation. He handed her a small sheet of music neatly written and told her the event would be that very evening. Back at her small apartment, she sat at her piano, staring at the simple notes on the sheet. At first glance, it seemed almost too easy, too straightforward. And yet, there was something about the tune that called to her. It was familiar, like a distant memory she had forgotten but could feel at the edges of her mind. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, letting the music wash over her, feeling the subtle rise and fall of the melody. As she practiced, she realized that the simplicity of the tune was exactly what made it so powerful. There were no complicated runs or extravagant flourishes, just pure, honest music. It reminded her why she loved the piano so much. Even a simple melody could hold so much emotion, so much potential. She began to play slowly, letting each note resonate, feeling it echo through the room. She imagined the event, the elegant guests, the sparkling lights, and a small smile formed on her lips. Maybe this wouldn't be so terrifying after all. Hours passed, and she played over and over, refining her touch, listening carefully to each sound. Her fingers moved more confidently with each repetition, and she began to notice subtle ways to enhance the melody, small expressions that could make it more personal. Though the tune was simple, she realized she could make it her own, and the thought gave her a quiet thrill. She was not just playing notes anymore. She was telling a story through her fingers. When she arrived at the event, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The hall was large and beautiful, filled with soft lights and laughter. Guests moved gracefully between tables, holding glasses of champagne and speaking in low, cultured tones. She was led to the piano, positioned in a prominent corner of the room. Her heart pounded as she looked at the crowd. They were all dressed impeccably, moving with an air of confidence and sophistication. It was intimidating, but she took a deep breath, recalling the hours she had spent at home, and the comfort she felt with her piano. As she sat down and placed her hands on the keys, a hush seemed to fall over the area immediately around her. The host had returned to his place nearby, watching with an encouraging smile. She began to play the simple tune as requested. At first, it was gentle and careful, her fingers gliding over the keys with precision. The melody filled the corner of the room, soft and inviting. People paused, some glancing curiously, others stopping completely to listen. Something remarkable began to happen. As she continued, she became more relaxed, more in tune with the music. Her fingers moved with a confidence she hadn't expected. The simple tune began to flow naturally, each note carrying a subtle emotion that seemed to touch the listeners without them even realizing it. The guests' chatter quieted further, replaced by an attentive silence. She had captured their attention without intending to. The music was speaking for her, telling a story that words never could. In those moments, she forgot everything else. The pressure, the crowd, even her own doubts. She was completely immersed in the music, letting it guide her. Each note became an expression of her own experiences, her own quiet life, and the dreams she had kept to herself for so long. She realized that even a simple tune, when played with sincerity and heart, could leave a deep impression. She was no longer just playing. She was connecting with every person in the room on an unspoken level. By the time the last note hung in the air, there was a pause, a moment of stunned silence. Then, slowly, one by one, people began to clap, softly at first, then more fervently. The host's eyes shone with admiration, and a few guests approached to compliment her. She felt a mixture of relief and pride, a warmth spreading through her chest that she had never experienced before. She realized that she had not just played a tune. She had made people feel something real, something beautiful. As she left the piano, she could hear the chatter returning, but now it was different. People were talking about her playing, the emotion in her music, and the unexpected depth she had shown. She walked through the room, quietly smiling to herself. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not for her job or her quiet demeanor, but for the hidden talent she had always carried within her. That night, a simple request to play a small tune had become an experience that no one in that room would forget. And for her, it was a reminder that sometimes, even the quietest lives hold the most extraordinary gifts. After the initial applause, she felt a rush of relief and curiosity. She had played the simple tune as requested, but something inside her urged her to continue, to explore the music further. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. People were no longer moving about casually. Their attention was focused, their eyes drawn to the piano as if expecting more. She felt a quiet thrill. There was a sense that this moment was bigger than a simple performance, that it might lead somewhere unexpected. She leaned back slightly and took a deep breath, letting the memory of her evenings at the piano guide her fingers. She began to play the same tune again, but this time with subtle variations. She added slight pauses, soft crescendos, and delicate trills that weren't written on the sheet. The melody was still recognizable, but it had become her own, carrying hints of emotion and depth that went beyond the original request. It was still a simple tune, but it was no longer ordinary. The sound began to fill the room in a way that captured the imagination of everyone present. Guests who had been talking quietly earlier stopped mid-conversation, turning their full attention to her. Some had drinks in hand, but they set them down, their eyes fixed on her hands as they moved across the keys. She could feel their curiosity, their fascination. The host watched closely, leaning slightly forward, a look of quiet admiration on his face. He hadn't expected the performance to hold such depth, and it showed in the way he followed every note. She realized that what she was doing wasn't just about playing music. It was about telling a story without words. She let the music carry her. Her fingers danced over the keys, adding subtle variations that reflected the quiet moments of her life. Every soft note held a memory, Every gentle trill held a feeling she had never shared with anyone. It was as though the piano had become an extension of herself, expressing thoughts and emotions she could never speak aloud. The simplicity of the tune gave her freedom to explore, to stretch the boundaries of what was expected. She could sense the energy in the room shifting, becoming more alive, more present with every measure. As she played, a few guests moved closer, unable to resist the pull of the music. They stood silently, mesmerized by the depth of expression in her playing. She could see the surprise in their eyes, the unspoken question. How could someone so quiet, so unassuming, create something so powerful? She smiled faintly, not breaking her focus on the keys, and allowed herself a small thought of satisfaction. For once, she was not just a background presence. She was at the center, commanding attention with her talent. The tune began to transform naturally, evolving into a more expressive piece. She experimented with dynamics, moving from soft, tender notes to stronger, more forceful chords. Each shift in volume, each change in tempo, was intentional, designed to guide the listener through a journey of emotion. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling the subtle narrative she was creating. Others leaned forward, intrigued, studying every movement of her hands. The room, which had moments ago been filled with casual chatter and movement, now felt intimate, connected through sound. A few people whispered quietly to each other, amazed by what they were hearing. Words like incredible and talented floated through the room, but she did not notice. She was fully immersed in the music, letting it carry her thoughts and feelings without interruption. She thought about the countless hours she had spent at her piano, practicing alone in her small apartment, perfecting the subtle expressions that now came effortlessly. Every late night, every moment of solitude, had prepared her for this. And now, she could see it making a difference in the lives of the people listening. She felt a subtle sense of power, not the kind that commands attention through force, but the kind that comes from touching people's hearts. The simple tune had become a bridge between her quiet life and the world outside. She was speaking without words, communicating through sound and emotion in a way that transcended language. The transformation was beautiful and natural, a testament to the intimacy she had with her instrument and the depth of feeling she poured into every note. Some guests began to sway slightly, caught up in the rhythm and emotion of the piece. The host's eyes glimmered with surprise and admiration. She noticed subtle expressions of awe on the faces of people who were used to seeing the world in terms of status and wealth. Here, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the music. The way it reached into them, stirred something familiar and yet new. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her secret world of piano playing, which had existed mostly in solitude, was now connecting her to others in a meaningful way. She began to take more liberties with the melody, allowing her instincts to guide her. The notes became more fluid, more expressive, and yet they remained rooted in the original tune. It was a delicate balance, preserving the familiarity that the guests expected, while introducing unexpected moments of emotion and brilliance. Her hands moved effortlessly across the keys, the hours of practice and dedication now revealing themselves naturally. The music was alive, breathing with energy, and she could feel the audience responding in kind. Time seemed to slow as she continued, each note holding its own space in the room. She was no longer thinking about what people would say or how she looked. She was simply present, fully immersed in the act of creation. There was a sense of freedom in that focus, a release from the constant self-awareness that had always defined her quiet life. In the music, she found liberation, and in that liberation, the audience found wonder. She noticed a subtle change in the host's demeanor. He was no longer simply an observer. He was fully engaged, leaning slightly forward, absorbed by the beauty of her playing. A few other guests began to approach, standing closer to the piano, captivated by the complexity and emotion she was expressing. The simple tune had become a powerful vehicle for her inner world, and she reveled in the connection it created. For the first time, she understood that music was not just an art form. It was a language, a way to communicate what could not be said aloud. The melody grew richer and more intricate, and yet it retained the simplicity that made it approachable and heartfelt. Each variation she introduced carried intention, each note a reflection of her own journey and experiences. She thought about the quiet moments of her life, the challenges she had faced, and the small joys that often went unnoticed. They all found a voice through her piano, creating a tapestry of sound that was both personal and universal. She could see the effect it had on the audience, the way their expressions shifted from casual curiosity to deep appreciation. As the tune reached its natural conclusion, she let the final notes linger, allowing silence to fall across the room. The effect was immediate. The guests were visibly moved, some whispering to each other, others simply absorbing the experience in quiet awe. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling a quiet pride in what she had accomplished. It had been more than just playing a tune. It had been an act of sharing a part of herself that few had ever witnessed. The host approached her once again, his eyes bright with admiration. He thanked her, complimenting the depth and emotion she had brought to the performance. Guests continued to offer praise, some even asking where she had trained or how she had learned to play with such nuance. She responded politely, but she knew that this moment was about more than technique or training. It was about connection, about revealing something genuine and human through the universal language of music. As she stepped away from the piano, a sense of fulfillment washed over her. She had started with a simple tune, as requested, but she had transformed it into an experience that no one would forget. The room, which had once been filled with polite chatter and casual attention, had become a space of shared emotion and appreciation. She realized that even quiet, unassuming people could leave a profound mark when they allowed their true talents to shine. That night, she had discovered the power of her own voice, and it was a voice that demanded to be heard. As she sat at the piano, a quiet anticipation settled over her. The first notes she struck were careful, deliberate, as if testing the air in the room. But there was an unspoken energy that seemed to flow from the guests, a subtle expectation that encouraged her to go further. She took a deep breath and let her fingers move more freely, allowing the music to grow organically. The simple tune began to stretch, filling the room with a richness that was impossible to ignore. The guests, who had been watching politely before, now leaned in with genuine interest. Some had paused in mid-conversation, their eyes following her every movement. Others had stopped sipping their drinks, their focus entirely on the music. She could feel the change in the atmosphere. The casual elegance of the event was giving way to something more intimate, more profound. The piano became a bridge between her quiet, unassuming presence and the world of people who had never expected to see her shine. She began to add subtle variations to the melody, small flourishes that reflected her own personality and the emotions she carried within her. Each note was deliberate yet fluid, a delicate balance of precision and feeling. She remembered the countless hours she had spent alone at her piano, exploring the possibilities of sound, experimenting with tempo and tone. Now all that practice found its voice, and she realized how powerful it could be when shared with others. A hush fell over the room. The chatter and laughter that had filled the space moments ago had vanished. The guests were caught in the spell of her music, drawn into a world she created note by note. Her hands moved gracefully across the keys, translating the emotions she had kept hidden for so long into a language everyone could understand. It was as if the simple tune she had been asked to play had become a vessel for something far greater. She allowed herself to become fully absorbed in the performance. The music was no longer just a sequence of notes. It was a story, a journey. Each variation she introduced carried meaning. Each pause and crescendo spoke of experiences and feelings she had never shared aloud. The simple tune had transformed into a dynamic expression of her inner world. She felt a sense of freedom she had never known, a release from the quiet life she had lived, where her talents were often unseen and unappreciated. The host watched intently, his admiration growing with every note. He could see the way her fingers moved with confidence, the subtle expressions in her touch, the way she brought the piano to life. He had expected a polite, simple performance, but what he witnessed was something extraordinary. Others around him were equally captivated. A few guests had tears in their eyes, moved by the sincerity and depth of the music. Some were leaning closer, drawn to the piano by an invisible thread of curiosity and awe. Her music began to take on a fiery quality, still rooted in the simple tune, but infused with energy and passion. She experimented with speed and intensity, letting her emotions dictate the flow. The once simple melody now surged with power, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. The guests could feel the intensity, the skill, and the heart she poured into each note. She had transformed from a quiet, unassuming figure into the center of attention, not through showmanship, but through genuine talent and emotional expression. The energy in the room was tangible. People who had been reserved and polite now moved closer, unable to resist the pull of the music. Conversations had stopped entirely. The only sound was the piano, echoing in the elegant space and touching each listener in a personal way. She noticed the expressions on their faces, the mixture of surprise, admiration, and wonder. The simple tune had become a revelation, revealing a depth of artistry that no one had anticipated. Her hands flew over the keys with precision, each movement deliberate yet natural. She added subtle harmonies, small flourishes that enhanced the melody without overpowering it. The audience was entranced, following the ebb and flow of the music as if it were a story unfolding before them. The quiet waitress who had appeared so ordinary just moments ago was now commanding the room with every note she played. The transformation was remarkable, and she could feel the excitement building within her as she continued. She began to experiment with dynamics, moving from soft, gentle passages to powerful, resonant chords that filled the space. The contrast created a sense of drama and intensity, drawing the listeners deeper into the experience. Each note was a reflection of her own journey, her struggles, her dreams, and the quiet determination that had carried her through years of unnoticed talent. The audience could sense the authenticity in her performance, and it moved them in ways they had not expected. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others studied her hands, fascinated by the skill and emotion she displayed. The host leaned forward, captivated, realizing that this was not just a performance but a moment of true artistry. The piano had become an extension of her being, a medium through which she could communicate directly with the hearts of those listening. The simple tune had evolved into something far more profound, and she reveled in the connection it created. Time seemed to blur as she played. She was no longer conscious of the minutes passing, only of the music and the effect it had on the audience. The room was united by the sound, every listener caught in the flow of the melody. She allowed herself to take small risks, adding unexpected chords and variations that enhanced the emotional impact. The audience responded instinctively, drawn into the journey she was creating. It was a shared experience, a moment of collective awe that transcended words. As the piece reached a climactic section, she let her emotions guide her fully. The music surged with intensity, powerful chords resonating through the room, each note a declaration of her talent and passion. Guests were visibly moved, some leaning forward, some whispering softly, others simply absorbing the sound with wide-eyed amazement. The transformation of the simple tune into a fiery, expressive masterpiece was complete, and she felt a sense of triumph that was deeply personal yet shared with everyone present. The final notes hung in the air, delicate and lingering, as she allowed the music to fade naturally. A moment of silence followed, profound and complete, as the audience absorbed what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first and then growing louder, a wave of appreciation and admiration that filled the room. She allowed herself a small, quiet smile, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had taken a simple request and turned it into something unforgettable, revealing a hidden depth of talent that few had ever seen. The host approached her, his eyes shining with respect and awe. He thanked her, complimenting the skill, emotion, and artistry she had displayed. Guests continued to praise her, some approaching to offer kind words, others simply standing in admiration, reluctant to break the spell of the performance. She felt a quiet pride, not for the recognition, but for the fact that she had shared a part of herself that had always been private, and it had touched others in a meaningful way. As she stepped away from the piano, the energy in the room shifted once more. The guests resumed their conversations, but now there was a new sense of connection, a shared experience that had brought them together. She walked among them, smiling politely, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and exhilaration. That night, a simple tune had become a bridge, revealing the power of talent, dedication, and the courage to step into the light. And for her, it was a reminder that even the quietest lives could hold moments of extraordinary brilliance. The room was silent except for the sound of her fingers dancing across the piano keys. She had reached a point in the performance where the music was no longer just a simple tune. It had grown, evolved into something powerful, something that commanded attention and emotion. The guests were captivated, leaning in, holding their breath, and listening with rapt focus. Every note she played seemed to carry a story, a memory, a feeling that could not be expressed in words. The piano had become an extension of her soul, and the audience felt it. Her hands moved faster now, gliding effortlessly across the keys. She introduced powerful chords that filled the room with resonance, and rapid passages that made the melody soar. Each movement was deliberate yet full of emotion. She felt a surge of energy, a sense of liberation as the music poured out of her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to truly express herself without restraint. The audience responded instinctively, their eyes wide, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the intensity. She continued to play, allowing the music to take her on a journey. The simple tune had become a dynamic masterpiece, with highs and lows, soft whispers and thunderous crescendos. Each note built upon the last, creating a tapestry of sound that enveloped the entire room. The energy was palpable, as if the music had transformed the space itself. Guests were moved to tears, some whispering to each other in awe, others sitting in stunned silence, completely absorbed in the performance. Her emotions guided every movement. She thought about the quiet moments of her life, the challenges she had faced, and the small victories she had achieved. Every feeling found a voice through her fingers. Every memory became a note in the composition. The audience could sense the authenticity in her playing, the truth behind each chord. It was not just skill that captivated them. It was the heart she poured into every sound. The simple tune had become a vessel for something far greater, a testament to her talent and passion. She introduced subtle harmonies that added depth and complexity without overwhelming the melody. The audience leaned in, captivated by the interplay of notes and the seamless flow of the music. Each variation felt natural, as if the piano itself was responding to her emotions. She experimented with dynamics, shifting from soft, tender passages to powerful, resonant chords that shook the room. The contrast created drama and intensity, keeping the listeners on the edge of their seats, fully engaged. The host watched with admiration, clearly impressed by the transformation of the simple tune into a breathtaking performance. He could see the skill, the emotion, and the courage it took to create such a moment. Others around him were equally mesmerized, some with tears glistening in their eyes, others whispering softly in wonder. The energy in the room had shifted completely. It was no longer a formal event, but a shared experience, united by the power of music and the talent of the young pianist. As the music grew more intense, she allowed herself to take risks, adding unexpected flourishes and rapid sequences that elevated the melody to new heights. The audience responded with instinctive fascination, drawn deeper into the performance. The simple tune was now a symphony of emotion, each note telling a part of her story, each chord resonating with the listeners' hearts. The room was filled with awe, admiration, and a quiet sense of reverence for the talent before them. She felt a surge of confidence, knowing that the music was reaching the hearts of everyone in the room. Her fingers moved with precision and fluidity, guided by both instinct and years of practice. The melody soared, then softened, then surged again, taking the audience on a journey they would not forget. She was fully immersed, completely present, and utterly connected to the music and the listeners. Every gesture, every note, was intentional, yet free, alive, and filled with meaning. Some guests were visibly moved, leaning closer, some with hands clasped, others with expressions of wonder. A few whispered to each other, amazed at the depth of feeling conveyed through a single instrument. The host was leaning forward, captivated, recognizing the extraordinary talent in front of him. The simple tune had become a masterpiece, fueled by her skill, her emotion, and her courage to share a hidden part of herself. The room had become a place of shared emotion, where music transcended words and spoke directly to the soul. The piece reached a climactic point, where the music surged with energy and intensity. Powerful chords reverberated through the room, and her hands moved with lightning speed, creating a sense of exhilaration and awe. The audience was completely absorbed, some with eyes closed, some leaning forward, completely captivated by the performance. It was a moment of pure connection, where the music united everyone in the room in a shared experience of beauty and emotion. As the final notes approached, she slowed the tempo slightly, allowing each sound to resonate fully. The melody softened, becoming tender and introspective. The room was silent, hanging on every note. She played the last chord with care, letting it linger in the air, creating a moment of profound stillness. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat, as if savoring the final echo of the music. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing louder, filling the room with appreciation and admiration. Guests approached, offering compliments, some moved to tears, others whispering words of wonder. The host's eyes shone with pride and amazement. She smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The simple tune had become more than a performance. It had become a moment of connection, of shared emotion, and of revelation. She had revealed a hidden depth of talent that no one had anticipated, and in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone present. As she stepped away from the piano, a quiet calm settled over her. The energy in the room remained, but it had transformed into admiration and respect. She walked among the guests, smiling softly, feeling the quiet pride of having shared a part of herself that had always been hidden. That night, a simple tune had become a journey, a testament to talent, courage, and the power of music to connect people. She realized that even the quietest, most unassuming lives could hold moments of extraordinary brilliance, waiting for the right moment to shine. After the final notes faded, a quiet stillness filled the room. The applause had erupted moments earlier, but now there was a lingering sense of awe, as if the guests were collectively absorbing what had just happened. She remained at the piano for a moment, letting the silence settle, feeling the warmth of accomplishment and connection. The music she had created had done more than entertain. It had touched hearts, awakened emotions, and left a mark that would not soon be forgotten. People began to approach her, one by one, their expressions filled with admiration and curiosity. Some offered words of praise, while others simply shook their heads in amazement, struggling to find the right words to express their astonishment. The host approached, a genuine smile on his face, and thanked her once more. He spoke of how unexpected and remarkable her performance had been, how she had transformed a simple request into an unforgettable experience. She smiled quietly, feeling both proud and humble, aware that the evening had been a turning point for her. The guests continued to mingle, but there was a new energy in the room. Conversations were quieter, more thoughtful, and many of the guests were still talking about the performance, sharing their feelings and impressions. The simple tune had become something extraordinary, and everyone present had felt its impact. She walked among them, accepting their compliments with gentle nods and quiet smiles, feeling a sense of validation that had always been missing from her life. For once, her talent was seen and appreciated. As the evening progressed, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had led her to this moment. She thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, the late nights in her small apartment, the quiet determination that had driven her to master the piano. All of those solitary moments had prepared her for this night, and now they had come together in a performance that had resonated deeply with others. She realized that her dedication and passion were not just personal achievements. They were gifts she could share with the world. The host invited her to join him for a brief conversation away from the crowd. They stepped to a quieter corner, and he expressed his admiration in more detail. He spoke about the courage it took to perform with such authenticity, the skill and emotion that shone through every note. He mentioned opportunities, suggesting that her talent could reach beyond the walls of the current gathering. She listened carefully, feeling a mix of surprise and excitement. The idea of sharing her music with a wider audience had never seemed possible, but now it felt within reach. After their conversation, she returned to the crowd, where people continued to approach her, eager to express their appreciation. Some asked where she had trained, others inquired about future performances, and a few simply thanked her for the emotional experience she had provided. She realized that her music had created a ripple effect, inspiring and moving people in ways she had never imagined. The simple tune had become a bridge, connecting her quiet, unassuming life to a world of admiration and opportunity. She took a moment to observe the room, noticing the subtle ways her performance had affected everyone. Couples exchanged glances, friends leaned closer to discuss the music, and even those who had been initially reserved were now engaged and expressive. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had begun as a polite gathering had transformed into a space of shared emotion, appreciation, and inspiration. She felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond applause or recognition. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had touched others in a meaningful way. As the evening drew to a close, the host offered a final word of thanks and praise, acknowledging the impact of her performance. Guests lingered, reluctant to leave, many discussing the unforgettable music they had just experienced. She felt a quiet pride, not in the attention, but in the knowledge that her talent had been recognized and appreciated. The music had created a lasting impression, one that would be remembered long after the night ended. Later, as she walked home, she reflected on the events of the evening. The applause, the admiration, and the heartfelt comments of the guests had left a deep impression on her. She thought about the journey that had led her here, the dedication, the late nights of practice, and the courage to share her talent despite her quiet nature. She realized that this night was more than a performance. It was a turning point, a moment when her hidden talent had found its place in the world. She knew that her life would never be quite the same. The experience had given her confidence, a sense of validation, and the knowledge that her music could touch and inspire others. She began to imagine the possibilities, the future performances, the opportunities to share her art with a wider audience. For the first time, she felt that her passion could become more than a private pursuit. It could be a bridge to connection, understanding, and influence. In the days that followed, the memory of the performance lingered. Guests spoke of the evening with friends, sharing stories of the remarkable music they had witnessed. Invitations and inquiries began to arrive, offering opportunities for her to play in new settings and reach new audiences. She approached each opportunity with quiet determination, remembering the thrill of connection she had felt during that transformative night. The simple tune that had been requested had become the spark for something far greater. She continued to practice, refining her skills and exploring new expressions through her music. The experience had taught her the power of authenticity and the impact of sharing one's true self. She played not just for recognition, but for the joy of creation and the ability to touch the hearts of others. Each note was a reflection of her journey, her emotions, and the connection she sought with the world through her art. Looking back, she realized that the evening had been more than a performance. It had been a revelation. The simple tune had opened doors she had never imagined, revealed her hidden potential, and allowed her to experience the profound effect her talent could have on others. She felt gratitude for the chance to share her music, to create moments of wonder and emotion, and to connect with people in a way that words could never achieve. She carried the lessons of that night forward, understanding that her talent was not just for herself, but for the world to experience. The applause and admiration were meaningful, but the true reward was the knowledge that her music had inspired, moved, and connected others. The simple tune had become a masterpiece, not only in her hands but in the hearts of those who had listened. It was a reminder that hidden talents, when shared with courage and authenticity, could create extraordinary moments and lasting memories.